Lateness, our study session went over, so we're ready for the regular meeting. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Madam City Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Sinks.
Here.
Councilmember Willie.
Here.
Councilmember Paul.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow.
Here.
Mayor Scharf.
Here. Okay, so our first item of business is ceremonial matters and presentations. The first one, present the award to Vishnu Athre from St. Andrew's Episcopal Church for winning the Calaxia Build Your Bot contest. So do we have Vishnu, is he here? Vishnu, are you here? Okay, let's move on. We can get that to him. Next is proclamation for September as National Preparedness Month. Present proclamation for September. Who is going to receive that? Great. Can you come up, and do you have... Yeah, everybody. You're all welcome to come. Yeah, do you have any speech or?
Yes, of course.
Great. Okay, let's. Under 45 minutes.
Jeez. Okay, I was just getting warmed up. But my name is Ken Erickson with the Office of Emergency Management here in Cupertino. I'm a longtime resident. I grew up, went to Cupertino High School, and so as a recipient of this for this month for the National Preparedness Award, I'm really proud to be able to accept this because it is a very, very important item that you're recognizing here for the month of September as the National Preparedness Month, but it's also something that we look at throughout the whole year, and we engage all the residents, which are up to 130,000 people we might have within our boundaries within the course of a day that we would be responsible for if something happened. All the residents, all the businesses, the schools, everybody, and this is all something that happens throughout the whole year, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to receive this and recognize that, and thank you for recognizing it for the month of September.
Great. So can everyone come up on stage and the whole council can join me? To receive this. It's very valuable. Okay. Does anyone else want to give a speech? Yeah? I don't speak. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So one more try. Is Vishnu here? Okay. So I want to do a report out on our closed session that we had at 5. It was conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1 regarding pending litigation, Friends of Better Cupertino et al. Versus City of Cupertino, Santa Clara Superior Court case number 18CV330190. SB 35 Vallco project. The council discussed with legal counsel this pending litigation for which discussion is in open session would prejudice the city in the litigation. No reportable action was taken. Madam City Clerk, do we have any postponements?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we are on to oral communications. If you would like to speak, you can fill out a blue card. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give your city. Actually, you don't even have to fill out a card if you don't want to. But we appreciate it if you do. So the first three speakers, Jennifer Griffin, followed by Julia Miyakawa, followed by Linda Wyckoff. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Jennifer Griffin. And I'm just going to talk about, not talking about Highway 17, but wanted to talk about some issues that are going on in other states and other cities. Right now, Cupertino and other cities in California are being subjected to some, as someone used the word, unprecedented issues in terms of the number of housing bills and the ADU bills that are coming out of our state of our capital of Sacramento, and are causing a great deal of upheaval, uncertainty, and confusion and fear in the public. Right now, in Oregon and Washington State, I have been trying to follow what is going on up there, if there are certain similar trends to what we're seeing. And we have to understand what is happening in other states and other places, particularly on our West Coast, which would be Oregon and Washington State. So Seattle recently, 26 of their R1 neighborhoods were upzoned to allow duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on a single residential lot. This is just in Seattle. I don't know how they decided what neighborhoods. There is backlash right now. This evidently was voted in by the Seattle City Council. Seattle is the largest city. It is not the capital of Washington State, but it is the largest city. So they voted this in their neighborhoods. There is backlash, and people are confused and they're pushing back. So right now in Oregon, August 8th, the governor of Oregon voted in HB 2001, which bans R1 housing in the entire state. This piece of legislation was introduced from a Portland Speaker of the House in January of 2019, and it was voted into effect and action for the entire state in 6.5 months by their governor. This allows duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes to be built on any residential lot, R1, in the entire state. Portland is the largest city. In Oregon, it is not the capital. So you have similar tendencies. I have 18 seconds. Right now, there appeared to be no public input at all. Portland is at risk. The Reed College neighborhood where Steve Jobs went to college, the Eastmoreland neighborhood, is sitting at risk. It is unprotected and it's 100
please finish
years old.
Because I don't want anyone to go over. We have so many cards.
That's fine. Right now,
So thank you,
the
Jennifer.
neighborhoods are actively trying to protect their neighborhoods from
Okay.
destruction.
Thank you, Jennifer. Julia Miyakawa, followed by Linda Wyckoff, followed by Gary Wong. Welcome, Julia.
Oh, thank you. Four environmental groups sent a letter to the City Council members on August 19, 2019, concerning the development of trails along Santa Clara County creeks, about the conflict between providing access to nature and intrusion into riparian zones that provide remnant habitat and movement linkages for wildlife. In 2017, they sent a similar letter to Valley Water explaining their concerns protecting wildlife habitat and migration corridors as creek-side trails are developed, and to protect creeks and riparian habitats from excessive trail development. They recommend distancing trail development from creek corridors. They are for placing new trail connections away from narrow and sensitive creek corridors using city streets instead. They mentioned that the number of new bridges should be minimized as they increase the impact on riparian corridor and habitat, and there will need for disruptive maintenance activities as the bridges need to be removed during maintenance operation. And at Regnar Creek, there would be 2 bridges. Riparian corridors need to be used to enhance riparian forests, wildlife linkages to enhance riparian forests, wildlife linkages, and pollinator. They go on to say this would be a step forward towards the implementation of the draft park master plan, of which the first goal is conservation. They also highly recommend doing an environmental impact report if the trail is to be developed that would address the many concerns of the Valley Water District letter of August 21st of 2018. The ERR would allow analytical consideration of alternative, including a street delineation and a complete assessment of the impact of the design and activities in and near Regnar Creek. They end the letter by strongly urging the city to pursue an alternative outside of the creek corridor and to the large extent possible, restore the creek riparian ecosystem instead. The letter is signed by representatives of Sierra Club, Loma Prieta Chapter, Committee for Green Foothills, Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and Clean South Bay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Next, we have Linda Wyckoff, followed by Gary Wong, followed by Suraj Dalvi, I believe. Okay, welcome, Linda.
Hi. Since Regnar Path doesn't fit its neighborhood well, the course of action early on was to disenfranchise adjacent neighbors, to disregard safety guidelines so that the trail cannot be called substandard if there are no standards, and to repeat falsehoods enough so that in time they become the de facto truth. It's like the fairy tale, The Emperor Has No Clothes. If the trail makes it to construction and it comes time for the public to finally see the finished product, many will say, "What's this? What the heck? Do I really want my kids on this? What benefit is it to Lawson students? Where is the beautiful nature trail we were promised? Where is the paved Class 1 bike path we were promised?" As now proposed, it will be an unpaved and rutted dirt path next to a drainage ditch. And if it's not paved, it's not Class 1. Due to the sightings of wild animal droppings on the trail, we adjacent neighbors were accused of walking our dogs back there. Another myth. Then there's the lure of massive gains in home values. That myth has got to be the most fantastic of all, as documented by a professional appraiser. I've been to many so-called outreach sessions where we were told what is going to happen to our neighborhood. The outreach was to the benefit of the proponents, not to us. Our output was neither listened to nor welcomed. This in no way constitutes legitimate outreach. City staff teamed with path proponents to give them access to tightly held information about the path while we had to dig for it. While we were digging deep, proponents were out gathering petition signatures. Staff told us that the petition doesn't matter. It's not a popularity contest, so we stopped signature collection at around 500 in August of 2018. As whispered now, however, it appears that the petition collecting may end up being all that matters. Another fairy tale is school connectivity. Regnar has a total of 40 points in the priority rating for school connectivity. Parents are being presented with the myth that this is a pneumatic tube that will deliver their children to school. If you think you've been hearing a lot from us lately, just wait till parents realize they've been sold a faulty bill of goods. The ProPath petition is based on myths. Don't forget, most who signed the petition supporting Regnart have never walked the trail and have little emotional investment. They were hard sold by those touting myths that will not hold up so well under the heat of public scrutiny once it's in. And I've just scratched the surface tonight.
Okay,
But
thank you.
remember, the truth will always come out in the end. Thank you.
We all hope so. Gary Wong, followed by Suraj Dalvi, followed by Elango Ganga. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor Scharf, Vice Mayor Chow, council members and staff. For the last year or so, we've been requesting a boundary survey for Regnart Creek Trail, and we've been told that it's not necessary. And so I wanted to provide some information, new information, of why we do think it's necessary. At a recent, this right side up? This way? Yeah, this is minutes from the Water District in Cupertino monthly meeting dated July 23rd, 2019. The highlighted section says they are now proposing a retaining curb along the edge of the fence going from Blaney to East Estates Drive. And we're not sure where it's going to be. Here's a picture of a map. You can't see, maybe it's better this way. You can see where the wall is, but we don't know where the boundaries are for the water district nor for the homeowners. And so what they're proposing is, this is what a fence looks like there now. And if they put a curb, the curb will be next to the fence, and we think that it's going to invade privacy because somebody could stand on that curb and now look into the yard. So it's something that we think that the council needs to consider. And if you look at the city's own policy, it has a policy, license survey policy, and it says the policy is created to protect the property rights of the owner of a property where work is being done, as well as the owners of adjacent properties. And it applies, to order to properly enforce setback and height requirements. The following matrix will be applied to all new construction and additions to existing buildings. So it appears the city's not following its own ordinance in that it needs to do a survey. We have asked for it. The Water District has asked for the survey. We think a survey should be done as part of this plan. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Suraj Dalvi, followed by Elango Ganga, followed by Benifer Dastur. Welcome, Suraj.
Thank you. I want to continue talking about the Regnart Creek Trail. I want to comment on the transparency of the entire issue. The 65% design has still not been released to the public. I don't think it is a good idea for the impacted neighbors to know about all the details only when we come to the city council meeting next time. For example, there are new developments and options that are being talked about about the retaining curb, which, as Gary mentioned, worsens the privacy concerns. Someone could stand on it, and our privacy concerns now got even worse. For the location, we don't know where the retaining curb is going to be. Is it going to be 2 feet inside? Is it going to be on the property fence? And has there been a boundary survey that has been done to figure out where the property lines are? We have heard about dirt path. I think no one mentioned that the dirt path is going to be even more noisy for the neighbors. So imagine like people walking or biking on the dirt path is going to be more noisy for the people who are sitting over there or people who are living there. The other thing that we have always mentioned is the dollar amount. I put the exact dollar amount over here instead of writing millions just to show how big it is for a 0.75 mile path. I think this has been also proposed as a safe route for kids. As a parent whose kids go into schools, I'm not worried about a 0.75 mile path that drops the kids to school. What I'm more worried or that gives me more jitters every day is the events that has occurred all over the US in the past 2 years about school shootings and stuff. And can we do something? Can we move some of this stuff, some of these dollars to even build a gate for our schools? Right now, I can enter the school at any time. Anyone can enter the school at any time. And I don't see an armed guard. I don't see a gate. I would ask the city council to really think about where we put this money. And if we still decide that regardless of all of this, we want to build the path, please let us follow what has worked so far. This path is a photograph of what has worked for the Creekside path from East Estate to Creekside. There is a good concrete wall, there is lighting, there is big enough fence on the other side. If you really want to go ahead with the path, please let's do this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alongo Ganga, Benaifer Dastur, and the last one is Beth Nodal. Welcome, Alongo.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I'm Ilango Ganga, speaking for myself. Thanks to Director Roger Lee and the staff for reviewing the process on how the bike and pet projects are prioritized and initiated during the CIP and out of the cycle at the City Council meeting last time. One problem with this, though. I wrote to the City Council that this process was not followed by the Ragnarok Creek, for the Ragnarok Creek Trail. I also submitted evidence for that. During the review, Council Member Darcy Paul brought up the point that as per the municipal code and as per the government code, that the CIP project should go to the Planning Commission for compliance to general plan, review of that. As far as I know, Ragnarok Creek Trail did not go to the Planning Commission for review. No surprise. Ragnarok Creek Trail did not follow any due process at all. Next, general plan emphasizes preserving the character of single-family residences and to ensure sufficient protections for privacy, noise, setbacks, visual impacts, and landscape buffers are provided. It also requires the city to work with the affected neighbors in locating trails to ensure that their concerns are appropriately addressed. However, issues with privacy, noise, setbacks, vegetation buffers have not been addressed in the 65% plan when I reviewed it in June. And also I would like to state that the Bicycle Commission is not the right place to review such issues, nor the Public Works Department. This should be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the Planning Department, and guidelines should be developed where there are no guidelines. As some of the council members are aware, Valley Water is in the process of designing definitive trail design guidelines, which the proposed Ragnarok Creek Trail may not adhere to or may not have the opportunity to adhere to because of the timing. Ideally, it should wait until this process is completed so that we can review for compliance. The residents have requested to publish 65% designs since May. However, this has not been released yet. The comments between the water district and the Valley Water that's been going on the review of the 65% design plans, I've been requesting the city to publish that, and the city refuses to publish that. And I think that this should be covered under the Public Records Act, and this should be published for transparency reason. I don't think the city or staff should be making that decision not to publish, what to publish and what not to publish. There are many other unresolved issues when I reviewed it in June. The city manager says that the staff is still working on the issues and will release the plans as soon as it is ready. And thank you, Deb, for the same. Residents have been requesting that the design plans and alternatives have been released at least 2 weeks before it comes to the council. So I just want to make sure that all the plans and the comments and everything should be published at least 2 weeks before bringing it down to the council. Otherwise, I request you to push out the schedule. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Next, Benaifer, followed by Beth. Welcome, Benaifer.
Good evening. The Regnat Creek Trail is scheduled to come up sometime in September on the city's agenda. Looking to all the negatives of the Regnat Creek, we hope that the city, while presenting the 65% design, also presents a detailed feasibility report of alternatives 4 and 5. Here is a refresher to the negatives of the proposed project currently. The cost ranges from 4 to 6 million, depending on how much the city plans to strip away the safety measures for users and residents. For example, leaving the path unpaved, not providing barriers for residents. That can affect the cost from 4 to 6 million. You can ignore but cannot deny the adverse impacts this trail will have. On the baseball field, Wilson Park, where the bridges are supposed to land, on the library field, on the South Blaney Street commute, on the creek and its habitat, on the water district maintenance of the creek, which has been brought again and again by the water district, on the city's operational budget, recurring yearly maintenance cost of $40,000 as outlined in the 65% plan. Trailheads access require mid-street crossings, a known collision hazard for bicyclists and cars. After spending millions and its impacts, the trail will be closed several times in a year for maintenance operations, weather and flooding related issues, in addition to being closed from dusk to dawn with no lighting permitted on the trail. The whole premise of this project was that the residential streets are unsafe and we need the trail for children to get to school safely. Keeping all of this in mind, we are hoping that the staff brings a detailed feasibility report for alternatives 4 and 5 so that the city council members can make an informed decision. The original feasibility report was geared to recommend Regnat Creek Alternative 1. We now know that the report was flawed with several errors and omissions. For the cost of the proposed trail, with all of its negatives, the city could develop both alternatives 5 and 4 at roughly 11% of the trail cost and create a safe biking infrastructure in the neighborhood on the streets currently labeled as safe routes to school. These alternatives would be usable 24/7, 365 days, and still leave money for other stalled public works projects. It is a win-win solution for everyone. Ultimately, what all do we want? We want safe streets for pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, safe neighborhoods, clean creeks, habitat protection, and we can do it all in a fiscally responsible way. We do not need to spend millions on a 0.8 recreational path, which it is now being called, in a neighborhood which has Library Field, Creekside Park, Wilson Park, Portal Park, all within a mile of each. So we have enough green spaces and recreational trails in our neighborhood. So my request to the city staff, please do what is right for the city you serve, be guided by facts, be fiscally responsible, be free from any kind of pressures. The elected officials are here today, gone tomorrow, but you will be left to face the challenges and consequences of a bad project. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Beth, and that's the last card I have for oral. Beth Nodal, welcome.
Hi, my name is Beth Nodal, and I'm a Cupertino resident. I'm opposed to the development of the Water District flood control area into the Ragnart Creek Trail. I recently learned that it's decided in order to cut the $6 million plan that they're going to create a dirt path instead of a paved path. So I think that has various issues with it. 3 I can think of kind of right off the top of my head is erosion, accessibility, and safety. As far as erosion, like anytime you have a dirt path next to a creek, anytime it rains, you get that washout. It's going to have to be regraded, stuff like that, constant maintenance. The other thing is accessibility. I mean, Cupertino has been working hard in putting in the ramps for wheelchairs and walkers in our neighborhood. I actually walk our neighborhood quite a bit. I live in the same area of Wilson Park and Creekside Park, and there are quite a few residents who use wheelchairs and walkers. And by creating this as a dirt path, you're basically saying we're going to eliminate it for some people. It's not going to be for everyone. The other thing is safety. As the dirt path, anytime it rains or gets wet, you're going to have mountain bikes or the big maintenance trucks who have to go back there, and they're going to create the big ruts. It's just a trip hazard for people running and walking back there. It's also going to make it nearly impossible for strollers to go back there. The next thing I want to talk about is something I had talked to about the last time I was here, which was the crossing at Rodriguez. And I said, I don't think this is a safe route to school, but particularly for Lawson Middle School, I don't think it's a safe route to school because after I viewed the 65% plan, the crossing at Rodriguez had nothing there. I'm shocked, but yet happy to say that the proponents of the trail now agree with me. They have taken Lawson Middle School off their latest petition as a safe route to school. Now they admit it is not a safe route to Lawson Middle School. The same type of street crossing is what the Eaton students would have to use on the other side of Library Field, where the trail kind of makes it hits perpendicular into Pacifica. So the kids are either going to have to make a 90-degree turn and take the sidewalk, which I don't think kids will do, or they're going to cross Pacifica where there's no crosswalk, no crossing guard, no stop sign, no intersection, nothing. The other thing I wanted to mention, again, I know I'm saying the same thing, but it's really important to me. I think that the Estates Crossing and the Blaney Crossing are blind spots. I think they're dangerous, and I think that if there's nothing done to stop and slow down the bikes to actually push that button, there's going to be accidents. Finally, I want to say 0.8 miles and $6 million seems ridiculous to me. And if you look at the Cupertino bike projects and you average their $292,000 per mile, if you take that $292,000, it gets you 20 miles of bike lanes if you use that $6 million for that. So I would ask you to prioritize the entire community and not just a small group of people by putting that money towards 20 miles of bike lanes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And remind everyone that on September 17th, Regnar Creek will be on the agenda. At that time, if you speak, we'll be able to respond and staff will respond, but we can't do that during oral communications. So next, we're on to reports by council and staff on committee assignments, and committee assignments only. John.
No committee meeting in this period.
Okay, thank you. Darcy.
We had a library working group meeting on the 22nd of August. It went well. We went over a number of items, including the retention of a potential economic consultant to possibly try to cost engineer the project to see if we can get the overall budget in line with our available funds. And then on the 27th, Councilmember Sinks and I sit on a transportation subcommittee with regard to responding to the grand jury's recent report regarding Valley Transit Authority or Valley Transportation Authority, and to talk about some of the recommendations and give feedback. I believe that item is on our consent calendar tonight as item number 8. So I'll just let those materials speak for themselves as to the results of our work.
Great. I'll go next. We've had 2 legislative review committee meetings. The latest was this morning, where we formulated our position on AB 1487. In fact, that meeting was because AB 1487 was just populated from an empty bill to all the text since the 27th meeting. So we had to have another meeting right away this morning. On the 28th, the West Valley Mayor's meeting, we had Kathy Robinson from Charities Housing speaking about affordable housing. That went really well. And then I rushed off to the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Airport Noise Roundtable. We did vote to extend funding for 6 more months. There was a proposal for 18 months, but the majority felt that we want to see if there's anything positive that comes out of this roundtable before we commit to spending so much money on this. I will tell you, every meeting of this roundtable is almost the same. It's the cities asking the FAA to go back to the way the airplanes used to be spaced out, so not one neighborhood was subjected to all the noise. Instead, right now, the planes come in on a rail, so one neighborhood gets all the noise. And all the cities would like it spread out. The FAA doesn't want to spread it out. And that's kind of the impasse that we're at, because they are not required to do anything that the cities say. It would have to come from the federal government directing downward for them to make any changes. I think that is all I have for now. Thank you.
So I'm also on the Legislative Review Committee. We had a meeting last week and a meeting this morning. Everything is on the city website on the positions that we took. You can check it out.
Thank you. So I'll reinforce that I'm proud of the work product associated with that. The letter on the consent agenda, and I thought it was a good partnership in coming up with it. It's in a place where other cities will be, I believe, influenced by the points we made, because this is a hot topic at the Cities Association, responding to that grand jury report. And finally, Darcy and I also attended a meeting that hadn't been convened with this big group of cities for several years. Back when we were working on Measure B in 2016, in the prelude to formation of that measure, North County and West Valley cities got together in their own interest to be able to negotiate on Measure B. We see new clouds on the horizon and potential opportunities, and so we have restarted those meetings, and Darcy and I are representing the city. They're convened by Mountain View, and I think we had most cities from the West Valley and North County participating, and we've noted that we were bypassed altogether when RM3 was formed, and we're intending to not have that happen again. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, now we are on to the consent calendar. I have one card pulling item 9. Does any member of the council want to pull any other item? If not, we can have a motion.
I'll move items 4 through 10 on consent calendar, accepting number 9.
Second. Vote, please.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, item 9, I have one card from Jennifer Griffin. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi. This item, I wasn't going to originally talk on it, but I saw that it was Airbnb, and I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. It appears in here that you all are in the process, I know the staff and city have moved forward with the regulation of the Airbnbs in Cupertino. Everyone's supposed to be getting their permits, interacting with the city, et cetera, if they have an Airbnb. And I was just wondering, who are these? My understanding was that Airbnb would be collecting the rents from their hosts and giving it to Cupertino. So why is the city interacting with some hosts? What's happened there? I mean, I understand there are things that happen, but why is the city interacting actually with some residents who have these facilities versus Airbnb used to be like they wanted to handle it themselves and then keep the residences secret and then give the rent to the city. But it appears that there's something else that's happened. I also wanted to find out how we're advancing with the city having the third party that they were going to contract with, so that if the residents had any complaints about the Airbnbs, they could contact this party that the city had contracted with to take care of any issues. Thank you.
So does staff want to comment on this? Welcome, Katie.
Good
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Katie Demura, Assistant to the City Manager. Essentially, what is happening is we do have a VCA, a voluntary collection agreement with Airbnb, in which they do collect transient occupancy tax on behalf of the hosts and remit that to the city. This is an amendment to that agreement, which would allow hosts that would register with a business ID and their tax information that they would be allowed to have the TOT given to them for them to then remit to the city directly. I think the intention of this is for traditional hospitality hosts such as hotels and bed and breakfasts who have other mechanisms for giving TOT to the city and reporting that to the city, and Airbnb would like to allow them to do that.
Okay, thank you. So can we have a motion on item 9, unless there's any discussion?
So as I understand, the other similar services like Airbnb are using similar model right now, so that's why they are requesting that.
Right.
to be
Other
compatible.
platforms do allow hosts to collect TOT directly to then remit to their corresponding agency. So in order to be consistent with what's out there in the market, Airbnb does want to allow for this in their platform.
So this would be allowed. Do you mean that everyone, if each host get to choose if they pay through Airbnb or the city, or all of them would be
They would
paying?
need to register for the program if they wanted to it's an opt-in, so if they want to be responsible for remitting their own TOT, then they would register for this program. And in the staff report, we outline what information they have to provide in order to register. And then we do get information on all registered hosts once a year and then along with their gross receipts in order to kind of confirm if they have been paying their TOT or not to the city.
No, what I mean is, do they now not have the option to pay through Airbnb?
Right
That's not
now-
an option with the amendment.
So
this amendment.
before this platform kind of software change, it happened automatically. So hosts would automatically have TOT collected by Airbnb, and Airbnb would remit that to the city. This is a software change that I believe that they're making on their platform.
What I mean is, so with this amendment, no host would be able to pay through Airbnb.
No.
All the hosts will
No.
have to do it?
So
Or is it
it's an
optional?
opt-in program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So they have option to do it either way.
correct.
And can we answer the question by Jennifer about the city hiring a consultant to handle complaint?
So that's in line with our regulations. The regulations haven't been formally adopted yet because we're going back to kind of add additional items that were discussed at our study session, which then also is having us go back to Planning Commission to kind of get their feedback on these new regulations, such as now it's been proposed that we would impose regulations on the platforms potentially. So
Right,
that's
this is
something
only
that
the
we can do.
collection agreement
This is
that
only
we're
the collection
discussing.
agreement.
That's all that's on the agenda. So,
Yeah, so very briefly, my understanding is if a hospitality organization like a hotel wants to participate, if we have any questions about the numbers we're getting, Airbnb will work with us to help us audit.
So according to the amendment, they will give us all the data for their registered hosts in terms of who's registered and their gross receipts, so we can determine what we should be getting. They will give that to us once every 12 months.
Okay, so in other words, we do have an ultimate check on this.
Right, correct.
Okay, I'm ready to move this item.
okay. Second?
Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Okay, it is, wow. It's 7:50. We're 30 minutes ahead of where the agenda said. It's unprecedented, isn't it? Okay. We are on to the second reading of ordinances. So this is the second reading of ordinance Numbers 19-2187 and 19-2188, adopting zoning, text, and map amendments related to the Vallco Shopping District Special Area. Application numbers MCA 2019-02, Z 2019-01, EA 2013-03. The applicant to the city of Cupertino, the location 10101 to 10333. Is that a mistake in the address there? There's 6 digits. Anyway, North Wolf Road, APNs 316-20080, 20081, 2103, 2107, 2101, 2105, 2106, 2104, 20088, 2092, 20094, 20099, 2100, and 20095. So what is the correct location in this agenda item? Because I don't think we have any 6-digit addresses here. Is it just 10133?
So, just a minute. So I need to recuse myself.
Oh,
out
I'm
of,
sorry. That's true.
Abundance of
Okay.
caution. So
Thank
because I
you.
live 939 feet away from.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor. We'll call you back when we're done with this. Okay. Do I need to do that all that over again? No? Okay. We'll wait for the Vice Mayor to leave the room. So let's just correct that address, I think.
I was just going to say that that's an error.
That's an
correction,
extra 3.
3 in there, yeah. It
Okay.
should be 10133.
Okay, so do we have a staff report?
We don't have a presentation. The staff report, a brief 1.5-page staff report is included in the packet. Basically, we just
Right.
outline the recommended actions.
Okay. So, no staff report. We'll bring it back to, I've got several speaker cards before we do anything else. We've got Jennifer Griffin, followed by Tim Cornwell, followed by Jonathan Bass, together with Kathan Van Duzen, and then finally Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I live near Vallco. I used to shop at Vallco. I wish we still had the retail at Vallco. Yes, this is obviously, you guys have worked very, very hard on this. The staff has worked hard on this. We did the second reading. I will say again, because I'm a resident that live in the east side who is highly impacted by this potential project, its fallout, the implications of what SB 35 is doing to us, our city, our neighborhood, our state, the western states, et cetera, I feel obligated. I feel that I can ask for the moon. The east side has been overloaded, abused, pushed around, trees cut down, just like schools taken over, overloaded because of lots and lots and lots of building projects in the east side. Vallco is in the east side, and it is kind of like currently like no man's land over there. It is upsetting to me because I think of the way Cupertino used to be and what we have lost. I have said before that we had such a great city in the 80s and 90s. I hate to be one of those people to look back, but we did. We had lots and lots of shopping available. We don't have that anymore. So I have to go to other places, drive hundreds of miles, put miles on my car looking for retail that other cities are blowing up too. So at this point, I'm going to say, please don't overload Cupertino High School. We are taking the direct brunt of however many housing units are eventually overloaded on Vallco, legal, not legal, SB 35, not SB 35, et cetera, et cetera. Why is Cupertino High School having to be the recipient of every high school student from this bloated project? Let's spread the pain out. I think that it's not unprecedented to have an agreement that half of those students would go to Sunnyvale schools. I think it's only fair. That happened with the Hamptons project. A lot of those, whenever they got around to building the 3 billion housing units they were going to do 6 years ago, some of those kids were going to Sunnyvale districts. And it has happened with one of the Prometheus apartment complex expansion at Homestead and Stilling. The other thing is, why do we have 35-foot setback? Our ash trees are behind the construction line where the Sears part was. To my understanding,
Okay, finish up,
all
please.
of the frontage of Vallco on Stevens Creek Boulevard is in heart of the city. All 35-foot setback of it. So all of those trees in the front are public trees.
Okay, thank you,
Let's get them out
Jennifer.
of the green fence and 35
Okay, Jennifer,
feet
please.
all the way across the property.
Thank you. Tim Cornwell, followed by Jonathan Bass and Catherine Van Duzen together. Welcome, Tim.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So I'm Tim Cornwell. I'm managing principal in charge of the San Francisco office of the Concord Group. By the way, I apologize for how I look today. I had shoulder surgery last week, so sort of struggling through. But in any case, I wanted to talk to you today about 3 major points. We were retained by the property owner to evaluate the financial feasibility of the 13.1 acre plan that's been discussed at length in this body. Right? There are 3 concerns that we have that we need to enumerate here tonight. The first is the original feasibility report created by another consultant more than a year ago, and then evaluated as a baseline as it relates to a new plan and a new set of assumptions around unit counts, square footages, the 13.1 acre plan that was created at the end of July, effectively lead us to an extremely thin positive land residual. What that means really is that any flaw in any of the assumptions that were made throughout the entire analysis, right, would lead you to a very difficult outcome, right, to a project that obviously would have its feasibility wiped from the map. There are 2 major concerns that we want to bring to light around the original EPS document, those concerns being obviously propagated and pulled through to the House Rath Economics report that was published at the end of July. Okay, the first really is around construction costs, and I'm sure in the study session that you had earlier this evening, you debated at length and heard some significant evidence as to the rising construction cost reality of the Bay Area. We've heard as much as 1% per month taking place in terms of hard construction costs for various product types in the Bay Area over the last several years, right? Given the demand for housing, the demand for office, and the limited labor pool and materials pool that we're really dealing with. So what we really did was look at a set of contractors and builders that were active in this environment today and asked them for real-time 2019 feedback as to the hard costs that would be likely that the property owner would be faced with, given the prototypes and the product types that were being considered. Okay, those results were as much as 30% higher than the assumptions used in the EPS document, again, pulled forward to the House Rath Economics report from earlier this summer. Okay. Secondly, and perhaps most concerningly, the BMR assumptions that were used. Okay. So in that original document, again, pulled all the way forward to the July date, the assumption for a condominium, a BMR condominium, was more than $830,000 of sales price. That's an error in analysis. In fact, in the study session that you saw earlier today, the BMR condominium sales prices range from $350,000 to $450,000. Our own math, when you really take out all of the associated monthly costs and apply it to a real family median income for moderate and median income, or median and moderate income housing types, gets us to $550,000. Any of these things significantly hurt the financial feasibility of the 13.1 acre plan.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan Bass and Catherine Van Duzen, welcome. Are you going to speak each 3 minutes, or one person going to speak for 6 minutes, or?
No, I'm going to cede my 3 minutes to Mr. Bass.
Okay, thank you. Just stand there the whole time.
And I hopefully won't use Ms. Van Duzen's 3 minutes.
Okay, great.
My name is Jonathan Bass. I'm one of the attorneys for the property owner of the subject site, Vallco Property Owner LLC. I'm here really for one purpose, and that is to ask you to reconsider the general plan amendment and the zoning ordinances adopted at the last city council meeting. I'm here, in other words, to wave the yellow flag on this NASCAR track, to get you to slow down before we have to deal with the legal wreckage, because that's the direction we're headed in. You just heard from Mr. Cornwell that the objective economic facts point inevitably to the conclusion that the kind of allowances, zoning that you're considering for this 13-acre site are simply unrealistic. They don't allow for a development that any developer would choose to invest its capital, its efforts, and its risk in. So the notion of whether it's 400 some odd residential units or 600 some odd residential units, the answer is there'll be no residential units, because no developer, including my client, would spend its money to develop that project, which won't return any kind of profit to the developer. And we think you know that. We think you know that the data, the assumptions that were used in your own reports are flawed, unrealistic, and unsupportable. We're all familiar with comments made at the prior meetings of this council, as well as the Planning Commission session, which suggests to us, certainly I think suggests to any reasonable observer, that the real goal is to obtain leverage, negotiating power on the part of the city against my client, so that if it ever comes down to negotiating a replacement project for the SB 35 project, which is going forward, the city will be able to present my client with an extremely unpalatable reality, which is an in-place amendment to the general plan and zoning which give my client no ability to develop the property. Of course, what you're considering here tonight won't change the ongoing SB 35 project, but it's not a legitimate use of your civic powers to apply unlawful pressure, unconstitutional pressure to a property owner in the hope that it will compromise or surrender some of its rights. And there's no leverage to be gained in any event. As you know, the SB 35 project is going forward, absent a court ruling against us, and you've already heard from us as to how we feel about the city's, what we regard as the city's dereliction of its obligation to defend rather than lay down and surrender to that case. But it's not just my client who will be forced to litigate with the city if its rights are impaired. The state has indicated, and you know this, its intention to sue the city of Cupertino if it doesn't live up to its housing element requirements. Our project is the bulwark against that lawsuit. And if we cannot develop this site, the city will suffer. The city will suffer from our litigation. The city will suffer from litigation filed by the state. That exposes the city to considerable, substantial costs, not just litigation costs, but potential damages that the city has no legitimate reason for incurring and ought not to incur. As I said, the SB 35 project is in progress. We have every intention of pursuing it. The changes that you're contemplating in the general plan and the zoning will have no effect on that. They will, however, expose the city to substantial litigation. I see no reason, no justification for the city to go down that road. You have a chance tonight to reconsider the actions you took 2 weeks ago that we think put the city in legal jeopardy, and I encourage you to take this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, before we go on, could the city attorney explain again the HCD letter we received and why we are obligated in our housing element to zone sufficient land for the number of units that we specified in our housing element? Because it seems to be a little bit of a misunderstanding here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things we could respond to there. My office reviewed the numerous legal claims that were made by Vallco property owners in their last letter, and concluded they were not valid claims, and we stand by that. Even with this new economic study, our consultant found the development of the residential was feasible. We used economic numbers that the Concord Group for Vallco itself used in its very recent letter to the city. When that was done, they kind of came up with new assumptions that we determined itself were not credible. And the council here is, is moving forward with these amendments not to gain negotiating leverage over Vallco property owner. It has made clear that what it is doing is considering as the housing element anticipated, whether to maintain the housing allocation on the site and whether to maintain the office allocation on the site. And the council has determined it will maintain the housing allocation on this site, which was for 389 units, which was what was determined to be necessary to meet the regional housing needs allocation. And so but the council's decided that it does not want to maintain the office allocation on the site because that significantly would deepen the jobs housing imbalance in the city, create new jobs that will not be able to be, the demand will not be able to be met with new housing. And so the council has decided to remove the office allocation in this amendment, but maintain the housing allocation, which it is doing by saying that those 459 units, up to 459 units, can be built by right, and is removing the existing specific plan requirement for those units. And I will note that I also disagree with the characterization of the letter by the California State Department of Housing and Community Development. That letter did not threaten to sue the city. It just noted, in fact, found that the city is in full compliance with state housing element law. It noted that right now the city's housing element is sufficiently zoned for the 389 units because the Vallco project is approved, and says that if the Vallco project is for some reason overturned by the courts, that the city should take additional actions to make sure that those 399 units can be provided. That is exactly what the city is doing now, even before we have a court ruling on the Vallco specific plans. So we are in compliance, as HCD found, and are we taking additional steps to remain in compliance regardless of what happens with the Vallco SB 35 project, which, as you note, these amendments have no impact on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I know last week or 2 weeks ago, there were people that said, why are you going so fast? Well, we got the HCD letter. We need to move expeditiously to stay in compliance should anything prevent the SB 35 from going forward, whether it's a lawsuit or whether some other reason it's decided not to be built. Okay, the next two cards I have are
If I may, I think I have another few seconds to use, if I may. If I could respond to what the city attorney just said.
Sure, you can have another, well, I can't set this, but sure, you can have another 1 minute.
Thank you. I would just say two things. No city ordinance, this city or any others, can overturn or supersede the laws of economics. I think you all understand from what Mr. Cornwell said, from our submissions, and from just the patent absurdity of some of the economic assumptions and financial assumptions in the studies to which the city attorney has pointed, that no developer would develop these units on this site with no other economic driver. And so it is simply illusory to suggest that the city of Cupertino will satisfy HCD requirements or the state of California requirements by purporting to allow, if you will, allow in quotes, development on a site that no developer would ever pursue. And that's what this plan does. You cannot strip away the economic inducements, the financial drivers of a project, and expect that anyone is going to build the remnant of that project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next I have Jean Bedord, followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Jean.
Hello, my name is Jean Bedord, and I live here in Cupertino. I'm here to clarify my remarks during the earlier study session, which found that the BMR linkage fees for retail made development economically unfeasible. The Vallco site is 50 acres. The council has arbitrarily zoned 13 acres as residential. That leaves 37 acres zoned retail. The property owner has told you this zoning makes development economically infeasible. Your own consultant is finding the same thing. Retail development is not commercially available at current fee levels. I think you need to rethink your actions that you have taken and defer action on this piecemeal, and it truly is piecemeal, revision of the general plan and rezoning. This does not make any economic sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Lisa Warren, followed by Liana Crabtree. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So I'm just here to state that I encourage you to go forward and your 2 weeks ago vote and do so again tonight. I just heard someone speak of laws of economics and financial assumptions. Well, I can say that in 2014 and probably well beyond that, in fact, late 2011, a Sandhill property employee was asking me about Vallco. And by the time we got to October 2014, there is what is known as the threat letter that came from Peter Powell himself to Planning Commission and Paul Brophy, who was the chair at the time. Financial assumptions made by Peter Powell and his investors, if they had any say, are what got Sandhill where they are today in this non-feasible development. They made financial assumptions that they would have a property that was zoned anything other than the way it was zoned when they purchased it. That is not the residents of Cupertino's fault. Why those assumptions were made, many of us have guesses. The fact is they bought a property zoned in one fashion and they now and instantly thought it would change to what they wished it to be. The office should have been removed, the office allocation should have been removed over a year ago. I'm glad that's going away because it's completely inappropriate given all the reasons that were discussed 2 weeks ago and more. Reed Mold stood right here and spoke and repeated himself when speaking of this specific plan for Vallco that has a development agreement. He stated more than once in his 3 minutes, if that's what it was at the time, that they wanted to have flexibility with a development agreement. That's not what a development agreement is. It gives you another sense of how they operate. And I, for one, do not want to sacrifice my quality of life nor the region's because someone made financial assumptions and thinks they can have flexibility after approval so that they can make more money than they need to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Next we have Liana Crabtree. That's the last card I have. Welcome, Liana.
My name is Liana Crabtree. I'm a Cupertino resident. I'm representing myself only, and no one pays me to speak before you today or promises me any form of compensation as a result of any actions you take based on anything I may have said. So I want to echo what Lisa Warren has just said. The property owner in November of 2014 purchased a retail-only site with 1.2 million square feet of retail use. In December of 2014, a majority council decided to make changes to the land use at that site, adding 2 million square feet of office, reducing the retail allotment by half, and adding basically a placeholder amount of housing, at that time 389 units, although it was unclear how much housing would actually finally be built, so we still don't know. So there is some concerns that there may be a taking situation here, because the value that the property owner purchased, 1.2 million square feet of retail use, has been reduced by half. Then it seems that you have the option to double that retail use. And then actually the value of the property is increased from what was purchased, because in addition to the retail use, you have already added housing. So that is a kind of a gift. We, the residents of Cupertino, are not responsible for making financially viable decisions for this property owner. That is on the onus of the property owner. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Liana. Now we will bring it back to the council. So I just had a couple of comments based on what some of the speakers said. I hope it's clear the rezoning of the 13.1 acres for the housing, 389, eventually with the bonuses, 620, it was anything but arbitrary. That is a direct result of the letter that HCD sent us informing us that should the SB 35 project not go forward for whatever reason, whether it's a result of a lawsuit or because the property owner doesn't want to do it anymore, whatever the reason, if it's not done, our housing element could go out of compliance because we had not rezoned any of the parcel for the 389 units in our housing element. Now, it is true, there's still 37 more acres besides that 13.1. And no one here has said that that remaining 37 acres needs to be retail forever. It would almost certainly be used for more housing than the 620 units max. It could be used for some office space if we desire to rezone it for that. But the idea that somehow we've said, oh, that other 37 acres can never be developed is just not an accurate statement. And I think that's all I have. John.
So I think we really went over everything the last time we're here, but for those that think we should discuss this more, the community wants Vallco redeveloped. There's no question about that. They've made it loud and clear, but they want it redeveloped in a way that they support. The 2 million square feet of office that brings 10,000 or more workers, without the housing to house those 10,000 workers, it's a huge problem for the entire community. The community that has children and other people that need to find a place to live, and competing against highly paid tech workers only makes it that much more difficult. The residents of Cupertino elected us to represent them. The residents of Cupertino voted down the developer's Measure D with the 2 million square feet of office. The residents of Cupertino filed the referendum for the specific plan with the close to 2 million square feet of office. And the residents of Cupertino elected us to represent them. The residents of Cupertino have a right to decide the future of their community, and we elected officials have a duty to represent those residents. Everyone that'll someday have a house will expect and will demand that their elected officials represent them. On top of the 2 million square feet of office that needs to be removed for the residents of Cupertino, the developer has tried to find ways to make 22-story buildings for which the general plan for their community does not intend. If a developer is going to take that approach, we elected officials have a duty to represent the residents and make sure that their intent is upheld and put very clear the height limits in that general plan. And to do what we need to do to make sure the city is not going to be caught in a lawsuit by not meeting our housing requirements. Again, the residents want Vallco redeveloped. That is a huge part of this community, and they want it redeveloped in a way that the community supports. We want the developer to make a profit. Let's just take a 1 minute to talk about the housing that I hear about at the podium tonight. I attended the Westport, the Oaks community meeting where the developer said on his 8 acres that he's proposing to build 242 apartments and single-family townhouses and townhomes on 8.1 acres. A resident asked him, "Are you sure you can make this financially viable?" And that developer stood in front of everyone, I was there, and said, "Yes, I know I can make this profitable." Okay. Take that 8.1 acres and size it up for 13 acres, and you wind up with 393. If he can make it viable, 8 acres for 242, then 13 can clearly be viable for not only 393, but 620. Now I ask, did the two that spoke at the podium, did they go and stand at the J.C. Penney site and look across the street at Rose Bowl? Rose Bowl was built, and it's 204 units on even a smaller site. 5 stories, and yes, 620 units on that 13-acre site would fit very nicely across from the Rose Bowl. I encourage those that are not feeling it's viable to go stand at the Macy's site and look across the street. We have a duty to our residents to do what we need to do on their behalf. And we want to help the housing shortage throughout the whole Bay Area by building as much housing as we possibly can without exacerbating the issue with 2 million square feet, 10,000 more highly paid high-tech workers to fight for the housing that's needed. I am committed to pushing housing. A lot of people were not here earlier when we talked about housing and in lieu of fees. And my request on staff was to work on coming up with a way to negate the in lieu of fees and push for housing for new projects. Rather than allowing developers to pay a fee to not build housing, let's encourage them to build housing. Again, I'm committed to making sure I do everything I can to bring housing to Cupertino and to make the projects that come what the community wants and supports. Thank you.
Okay, Darcy.
I have no comments, but I'm happy to bring a motion if, if it's appropriate.
Rod, do you have?
Yeah, I made my points last time. Compare 2018 to 2019. In 2018, we started the beginning of the year. We kicked off an aggressive process to plan in the entire site. We got what that council majority thought was a good plan. We negotiated with the developer. We assured we were careful to ensure that we had something that looked economically feasible. Because for all the talk about what the residents want and what the residents have, you have a property owner here. And if the property owner says this is economically unfeasible, I'm not going to do that, it could be a bluff. But clearly in this case, I think we would acknowledge that if all you're doing is planning about a quarter of the site, 13 out of 50-ish acres, that's not really a plan. It's a piecemeal way of going about this. So my concern about this is rather than following, if you didn't like the specific plan and you thought we should do another one, that's the thing we should have been spending the last 9 months doing. Because in 2018, when this finally got queued up in the second half of September for a vote, we'd spent a lot of time on an intensive process to plan the entire thing. Here, what we're doing is taking a quarter of the site and saying, yeah, put some houses there. That's not a plan, right? And I think what we've now gotten into is a situation where both sides have dug in their heels. And, the residents of Cupertino may not like it, but the property owner has some rights too. And we're going to be spending a lot of money, both sides, on legal fees that could better be going to community benefits. So I'll be voting no on this.
Yeah,
again.
no, I completely agree with Councilmember Sinks. I think we don't need to be spending a lot of money on both sides for litigation. And near the end of 2017, when a lot of these housing bills were about to be, put into effect, Councilmember Sinks and I spoke, and we thought that it would be a good idea to examine that 2 million square feet of office. And I just see this as a remediation that should have happened quite a long time ago. I didn't vote for this provisional allocation at the end of 2014, and I think that if you listen to what everyone's saying, there's a lot of willingness to keep talking. We've encouraged our city manager to reach out to the applicant and landowner and keep discussing. I think that, as a professional and someone who does engage in quite a bit of litigation on a advocacy-based basis, my best piece of advice to clients is don't get into a lawsuit. And I think that we should just keep, that conversation going. There's a lot of appetite to go ahead and move forward with this space. So with that, I'm going to ask the city clerk to read ordinance number 19-2187. And I know we have two ordinances, but I'd like to take them one at a time for procedural purposes.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 19-2187, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, eliminating references in the municipal code to the Vallco Town Center specific plan and adding language establishing development standards for a new mixed-use planned development with multifamily R3 residential and general commercial zoning designation PR3CG.
I move that ordinance number 19-2187 be read by title only, and that the city clerk's reading constitute the second reading thereof.
Second. Vote with your lights.
And the motion carries with Sinks voting no and Chow recusing.
I move that ordinance number 19-2187 be enacted.
Second.
And the motion carries with Sinks voting no and Chow absent. Excuse me, she is recusing.
Before I ask the city clerk to conduct the second reading of ordinance number 19-2188, I would really like to put out a request to the general public as well as our fellow policymakers across the state and the cities and the counties in California. It's one of these things where we have a lot of developmental and economic pressures on us. When we're pointing out pressures based upon creation of jobs and the need for more housing, and we're very rightly pointing out that transit is an issue and that we need to collectively work together on that. It's something that has been deeply disappointing to see legislators point at us and basically take the line that they too will ignore the impacts of office and of creation of jobs, and will simply play this finger-pointing game. The fact of the matter is we are opening the door for a conversation, and once again I reiterate that our new city manager, who's doing a great job, is reaching out and is in communication with, from what I understand, the primary stakeholder, and I would very much look forward to going along the lines of what we've more recently seen here. And so with that, I would ask that the city clerk conduct the second reading of ordinance number 19-2188.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 19-2188, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, amending the zoning map to rezone 13.1 acres within the Vallco Shopping District Special Area to mixed-use planned development with multifamily R3 residential zoning, PR3 CG, and general commercial uses, and the remainder of the special area to general commercial CG.
I move that ordinance.
Second. Oh, do we
thank
need
you.
a second?
Let me
Okay.
bring the motion first. I move that ordinance number 19-2188 be read by title only, and that the city clerk's reading constitute the second reading thereof.
Okay, now I'll second.
Motion carries with Sinks voting no and Chow recusing.
I move that ordinance number 19-2188 be enacted.
Second.
Motion carries with Sinks voting no and Chow recusing.
Okay, so now the vice mayor may come back, I believe. Yes, welcome back, Leong. Okay, we're on to item 12, application and review procedures for projects proposed pursuant to Senate Bill 35, application number CP 2019-04, applicant City of Cupertino, location citywide. So let's have a staff report.
Sure, we'll have a staff presentation for you. At the last month meeting, where staff received direction from City Council to make some edits and improvements to our last proposal. Caitlin Brown is back here today making that presentation, discussing some of those changes as well as responses to the public comments. And at the end of this session, we'll be asking City Council to adopt the resolutions as attached. So with that, I'll hand it over to Caitlin. Caitlin?
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. We are asking in this council meeting that you adopt the resolution for the application and review procedures for projects proposed pursuant to Senate Bill SB 35, and review and provide input on the draft SB 35 application package. As mentioned before, these procedures would apply to any future SB 35 application. They do not apply to the Vallco SB 35 project that was approved by the city last year. Both the Planning Commission and the City Council held study sessions on drafts of the city's proposed procedures. At these sessions, staff provided information on the background and requirements of SB 35, recent amendments to the law, and Housing and Community Development's SB 35 guidelines. Staff also reviewed the proposed procedures and application package, and the council directed staff to make changes to the resolution, the application package, and to respond to comments. This presentation will focus on the changes made since the council study session and will not repeat the background information. Changes that were made to the resolution. We added language to the recitals to reflect that Assembly Bill AB 101 was adopted as a budget trailer bill and could reduce the amount of housing provided in SB 35 projects. We also added information to the resolution, finding that the city's adoption of the SB 35 procedures is not itself a project under CEQA. We also amended language referring to the application checklist to clarify that the checklist includes detailed requirements that ensure sufficient information will be provided to determine whether the development is consistent with the required objective planning standards. This includes the 2/3 residential requirement, which I will discuss a bit more when I talk about the application checklist. The procedures also now allow the Community Development Director to schedule, on a case-by-case basis, one additional oversight meeting to assess a mixed-use project's compliance with the 2/3 residential requirement prior to the joint oversight meeting held for all SB 35 applications. Finally, the procedures now make clear that the Council and Planning Commission's oversight meeting will also consider any density bonus application and that application's consistency with objective standards. Changes we made to the eligibility checklist. We revised the affordability section to provide that the objective standards in the city's inclusionary ordinance apply to the development under the SB 35 process, and clarified that in-lieu fees would only be allowed for projects of 6 units or less. Also, in response to Ms. Moore's comments, we revised the language in the location section so that it mirrors the language in the SB 35 guidelines. In the application package, we made a few updates. We required proposed unit counts, both with and without the density bonus, to determine compliance with the site's density. On the list of eligibility questions and on the certification of compliance, we made a handful of minor clarifying changes. And because the guidelines require that the project's affordable units be distributed throughout the development and of comparable size and quality to the market rate units, we added this as an express question as well. Also in the application package, we updated the application checklist in response to comments. And we included an exhibit demonstrating how to calculate square footage, which will ensure that the applicants submit sufficient information for the city to determine compliance with the 2/3 residential requirement. This is still in draft format and has been provided to you as a desk item. And finally, we have added that applicants must submit additional information regarding a listed hazardous waste site, floodway, or flood hazard area. So for the recommended action, staff recommends that you adopt the resolution and provide any comments you may have on the application package. We're available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any speaker cards on this item? Wow, amazing.
Jennifer's indicating that she has one.
Okay, hurry and get your cards in. Okay, welcome, Lisa.
Just quickly, on the checklist, I would encourage you to shorten the age of a title report, because I believe in the checklist, unless it's changed, and I apologize if it's changed, and I haven't read the red line. It was a 3-month-old title report that would be accepted with an application. My opinion, based on speaking to commercial real estate people and title companies, is that it should be 1 month or less. And I should also note that it should certainly be presented as a linked version of the title report so that every linked document, easements, etc., is accessible to staff when reviewing. Thank you.
So can staff comment on that title report?
We have not made any changes to that, but staff can see what is required for all other project applications and apply that standard. Right now, it should be within the past 3 months, but the city could consider updating that. But we can certainly look at that. And as a clarification, the council is not being asked to adopt the application package. So as we receive comments, we can certainly take them into account.
Okay.
So
Leon?
that detail is not in any municipal code. It's an administrative procedure that staff can update later, right?
I think your question is,
application
will
package.
the application package be adopted as part of the municipal code? And the answer
I'm
is no.
assuming it's not yet. So it's a document that the staff will keep updating, providing comments. So the staff will look into the title report.
That's exactly right.
Duration. If say currently we require only 3 months for all projects, would we consider requiring 1 month for all projects?
That's certainly something the city could do, yes.
Mm-hmm. So do we want to give that direction?
So I'm just wondering where the 3 months came from. I know if I buy a house, I can't use a 3-month-old title report. It has to be more recent. So where, why is it 3 months and not 6 months or not 1 month? Where did 3? It's not on, your mic's not on.
Oh,
Or you're not speaking close enough.
too tall.
Here you go. My fault. User error. So I think that's an existing requirement, but we can certainly look into that and making that a 1 month if that's what the city council wishes to proceed with.
Well,
We understand
I'm
that.
not sure we want that. I just want to know, why is it 3 months and not 5 months or 1 month? What's the magic of 3
Yeah, I don't have the
months?
answer for you. I think it's just something that's we've always been a policy, a practice that we've been using.
So let's see what other cities are using, if 1 month makes sense. But I think a resident did bring up the issue that the Vallco title report for the SB 35 project, which was submitted in March 2018, that title report was from 2017. Something is way over 3 months. So do we enforce that 3 months harshly, or it's just a recommendation? I'm just curious.
I don't think we're enforcing that very strictly, but we certainly will do that in this particular process as we take a look at what other jurisdictions are also doing.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Jennifer Griffin. Because of the monumental amount of housing bills that have been cranked out in Sacramento, and I'll throw the ADUs in there too, in the last 4 years, I will say again that someone I was speaking to had said that this was unprecedented in their lifetime. And this is someone that should know because they're older. What is happening to the state is unprecedented. It is not normal. SB 35 has caused all of us to become masters at looking at what is coming out of Sacramento, what our politicians are doing, what they are saying, what the public is not being told, what is being told to us, and we're supposed to be good little kiddies and believe everything. SB 35 is overloading city infrastructure. It's overloading the traffic. It's overloading schools. We don't know what its true intent was, but now it is causing upheaval and bedlam in every city in the state. The intent is to destabilize local control, city control, and citizen control in the state and hand it over to a few unelected people, minority people. Sorry, that came out wrong. This is the largest land grab in the history of the state. It is taking away the ability of California citizens and their communities and their cities to make their own decisions and putting that control into the hands of a few private, non-elected interests. I am following what's going on with HB 2001 in Oregon because it says in that, which is the law of the land in Oregon, it says in HB 2001, poor or weak city infrastructure is no reason not to build duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on private residential R1 lots. No reason. That means that a city that had overloaded infrastructure because maybe it was a poorer section of a city, that bill doesn't care You shall put in duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. That means that someone up there is not caring about the cities. So I say again, what is SB 35? What is HB 2001? Why are these things coming out of Sacramento? We have to be wary and watch and make sure that we maintain local control.
Okay.
Because believe me, it's going to be taken away from us.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Kitty Moore. And if anyone else wants to speak, please submit a card. Welcome, Kitty.
Good evening. I'm representing myself only. I just have a question on your item 21. Are the project's affordable units distributed throughout the development and of comparable size, both in terms of the square footage and the number of bedrooms and quality, to the market rate units with access to the same common areas and amenities? And the reason I have a question is because you mentioned in item 20, is the project seeking a density bonus and/or any incentive, concession, waiver, or reduction of parking standards under state density bonus law? And the question is, are you telling us that, or making a judgment about whether or not the size of the units and square footage and number of bedrooms can be taken as a concession? So I'd like to have an answer to that. And then if you would consider in Government Code 65962.5, there's a certification that needs to be signed and discussing whether or not the site is listed pursuant to that government code. And I would like to have that certification added into your certification of compliance and eligibility requirements. It's not in here currently. So I believe it's item G, 65962.5G. Thank you.
Wait, can you go back to item 21 so we can have, so, I mean, the way I'm reading this is it's asking that question. However, if they take that concession, I mean, item 21 would be moot, right? Because they're allowed as one of the concessions to not make them comparable. Is
Mayor,
that true?
If I may, I'll just say that the HCD guidelines that came out in November of last year clarified that that is not a concession that can be taken under density bonus law.
Oh, so that's a change then.
That's right.
Okay,
And so that is
wonderful.
why we added this provision here to make clear that that's one of the requirements that must be met for qualifying SB 35.
Thank you very much. I wasn't aware, and I think that's a great change because we really want the units to be comparable. Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a question on that. I think I mentioned this morning. So I think other cities specifically says in their code that concessions on BMR quality is not allowed concession for density bonus law. Could we codify that so it's clear?
We can look into that. I'll say that the amendments to the BMR language isn't what is before you now, and I think that's something we could look into as potential updates to those amendments.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another thing, I think this question, all they need to do is to say yes. How would the staff verify? What supporting material do we require them to provide so that it's easily verifiable by the staff within the time limit? So I thought this is a very loaded question. So many things all together. Shouldn't they be broken up into smaller items, and then they should provide proof where in the plan set this shows it's evenly distributed? Where is it in the plan set shows here is a number of units? Because I think Vallco SB 35 project, if you look at the plan set, there is only average unit for studio size, average size for studio. That's even average over BMR and market rate. So it's very hard to find out exactly what's the size for the BMR unit. unless you look at the floor plan. So then that means we need to require upfront provide this information to us, so our staff doesn't have to look everywhere. And this should be maybe standard requirement for all projects, not just SB 35.
Okay, yes. So right now, the plan sets do require identification of the BMR units and also the size, explaining the size and, size and location of those units. But we could look into requiring some sort of table laying out.
Yeah, I think they have a table, summary table up front, but that summary table doesn't have the breakdown for one bedroom unit for BMR, what's the size, and market rate unit, studio, what's the size, and where it is. And I would have to look at like building 8, level 1. Here is a floor plan, and then one small rectangle. I need to really. It took me a while to find out. Okay, here is the size for the location of BMR, and then I remember Tim had to help me to measure the size of that room to actually find out the square footage of that room, because it's not easily available. So we need this all to be easily available.
And I'll note that item number 19 on the requirements for the application checklist include if they're requesting a density bonus, they have to show the location and square footage of those units, the floor area. So we have specific requirements there.
Are there existing requirements in our, or this is new one?
Yes, so the density bonus, if you're applying for a density bonus and or, of course, the BMR units require you to show the location of those units and the size of those units.
Funny, then how come it took the former interim city manager a while to answer how big is the BMR units?
Yeah, and I'll note.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Kitty, do you have anything more? You still have time left.
Okay, so it's actually 65962.5F, the hazardous waste and substances statement. That was what I was hoping you could add to the certification.
Yeah, so that one, I think San Jose does require that. I remember I saw they require a certification with each project, but we don't have that, so can we add that?
So we have added the requirement for the project applicant to submit the signed hazardous waste statement that Ms. Moore is referring to as required by Government Code Section 65962.5, Subdivision F. And that is in checklist item number 35 on page 19 of the application checklist. We did not add it to the certifications, certification of compliance with the eligibility requirements, because these items are items that the project applicant in SB 35 must specifically certify to. And Government Code Section 65962.5 doesn't say this has to be a certification, it just needs to be a signed statement. So we are asking for the same information, just in a different location in the application checklist.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can bring it back to council. There's no more cards. So, Leon, why don't you go first this time?
Sorry, just, so the residential use, I think that's one area that was pretty tricky to figure out. So, sorry, I didn't look at the application packet in detail. What have we, what you are going to require so that it's easier for the city staff to double check the residential use?
So in specifically the 2/3 requirement between, yes. So we have provided in a desk item. And if you flip to the last page of that desk item, we have laid out a sample square footage calculation.
Well, maybe we should, maybe a copy can be there. The public can see.
And so we're providing this for illustrative purposes only, but this will be, this is the type of information that the city will ask for and will create a final table like this to provide applicants as a part of the application package. And it will break down the different types of spaces in a development and will classify them as residential or non-residential and explain the square footage. And this will be attached to the floor plans.
So on the floor plan, would we expect to see, for example, I think Berkeley's application, they have a sample to show, and in this color, it's residential, that color, it's some other use, so that visually you can also see for a floor which portion correspond to which part in the table, like here, first floor, right? And so which part is, are they going to correspond to the floor plan?
Have it be more visual and provide a color scheme. I think that's a good idea that we can implement.
Yeah, would that be?
Apologies. So there are example floor plans that will go along with the chart that we can include colors on so that it creates a very easy visual of the amount of residential versus commercial.
So how about shared space? Do we have guideline on how they can calculate the shared space?
Yes, so SB 35 provides that any shared space utilized by both residential and non-residential uses shall be credited proportionally to intended use.
So how would one credit that? For example, if you have a lobby in a building that's retail in the first floor, but maybe housing is in second, third, fourth floor, then do we have 1/4, or how is that proportional? Is by total square footage?
So the square footage will be divided based on the expected use. So I don't know if it's a perfect science, but that's what the guidelines provide.
Well, intended and expected are both passive verbs. I mean, whose expectations and whose intentions are we following here when we're making these determinations? I mean, Vice Mayor Chow pointed out a mathematically logical way of breaking it down. If you have 1/4 of a building for retail and 3/4 for residential, then perhaps that lobby on the first floor is 1/4 for retail and 3/4 for residential.
But
what's
in
to stop?
practice, it's
But what's
really
to stop?
retail.
But whose intentions and whose, right, expectations are we following here? Are we going to follow the applicant who then tells us, well, most of this is residential, so this is a residential lobby? Or do we have another set of expectations where if the lobby is located in the middle of a retail floor, that we expect it to be considered retail?
Yeah.
So how are these determinations going to be made? I also have a kind of a related question to that. When there are floor plans and there are numbers attached to these floor plans in terms of square footages, I mean, are we doing independent calculations based upon these, or are we taking the numbers that are provided for us? It's a related question because it goes to the boundaries of how far we're going to be guiding our staff to go in terms of these independent calculations.
So ideally, we would be double checking the square footages going forward with the SB 35 project and all other projects. It's just larger projects sometimes is challenging to fine tune and locate those information. But with this checklist, it'll be a lot easier for staff to look at that information and double check the square footages and sizes.
Right. And do you have any kinds of thoughts on the original question for Vice Mayor Chow's example of lobby space within the first floor retail of a building?
I think if council wants to consider some kind of ratio, that's something that we can look at. But again, you go into sort of the intent of the project. I think typically when we look at intent of a project is really the intent of what the project applicant proposes for that particular use, and you'll have to look at how that lobby is associated with the residential use versus the retail use to kind of make that judgment call. So, but taking away that judgment call, then what you can do is you could look at some kind of ratio to kind of subdivide our space.
Right, and so that really should be within the discretion of our staff. I mean, I think this is probably the message that we're sending here. I mean, especially given the fact that the larger project you get, the more of these types of discretionary spaces you're going to encounter, and ultimately we're tasked with the hiring of our city manager, who then goes on and has oversight over the staff. But I mean, in terms of who ultimately makes those kind of discretionary determinations, it seems like it should be with the staff rather than being told, well, this entire swath of area is assigned to whatever is most beneficial for the purposes of our qualification, for instance.
Absolutely agreed, and I will hope that the Director of Community Development will kind of play a part in making that determination as well, as opposed to kind of solely rely on the applicant.
So, but then the different staff member might have different opinion on this. So,
right. So
then, for example, the lobby of the first floor, that's all retail. Likely that lobby will be used mostly by retail shoppers, but it might be accessible for the other 3 floors that's up on top, so they can claim that 3/4 of that retail, that lobby is for residential. Then how do we determine that? And then, as we have seen, people, they have been claiming the amount of amenity space is even more than the living space. So there is really no limit on how much they can claim as amenity. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that the sample calculations that was provided to council demonstrates how the proportionality would be calculated. So it shows that, for bike storage, if it's used by both commercial, non-residential and residential, but you have 60% residential, then we're going to calculate it this way. And so I think the intent of this was to try to clarify some of that, of how it's being divided, or how it's being calculated.
I guess it's more like electrical spaces, because we have seen that almost only the residential has electrical spaces on the other things, and then the office and retail has no electrical space at all in the Vallco SB 35 calculation. So I want to clarify, are they allowed to just claim that?
And what is considered?
So, for example, then we can say total electrical square footage in the entire project should be proportional to the amount of space that's actually retail and office. Mm-hmm. So you cannot say, okay, all of the electrical is for residential and the 0 for office, then that wouldn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can make that a rule.
Well, and I think that's captured where we say shall be credited proportionally to intended use. So it's
right.
Which, you have to first
it's hard
figure
to
out
say
which is going to be
electrical
used.
what's the intended use, because they might all be combined, which is why we have seen in the Vallco SB 35 that they say they claim the whole electrical is for residential, and in some cases a whole first floor and ground floor is for residential. So
I have a quick question.
No
Sorry
limit.
to disrupt the split
fine.
screen or whatever. So applying that standard that you're describing, what happens to parking if an application is resubmitted? It has parking for residential. It has parking for non-residential. I mean, do we treat those, square feet consistently now? We either don't count or count both?
Yes, we will count both. So the SB 35 guidelines that were published in 2018 require a comparison of the gross square footage of residential space and related facilities, which are defined to include residential parking, to the gross square footage of commercial or non-residential spaces, and that will include parking as well. So parking will be counted for both residential and for non-residential.
Okay.
Even underground is still not counted, right?
According to the SB 35 guidelines, they don't make any differentiation between above ground or below ground or at grade parking.
Really? In 2018, there is an amendment, so they will count both?
The guidelines were released after the SB 35 project, and Cupertino was.
That's okay. I'm just curious. So there is oh, you mean the HCD guideline?
That's correct.
Okay.
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 Okay. Okay,
Well,
Darcy.
Well, for further discussion purposes, can I just bring forward
Sure.
a motion? Okay, so I move that the city council.
Wait, I mean, does other people might want to weigh
Well,
in
well,
here?
I mean, if we want to keep discussing.
Yeah,
I think I
I
put a
mean-
motion on the table and we can continue. discussing.
Okay, sure.
I'll second.
Okay. Well, let me make the motion. I move that the city council find adoption of the proposed resolution exempt from CEQA and adopt resolution number 19-113 for application and review procedures for projects proposed pursuant to Senate Bill 35. And I would like to make a modification in language on one part of it. That's section 5. It's page 3 of the file. Under subsection A, it's the bottom of page 3. I would ask that the last clause of that sentence states, quote, "The city will determine whether the project conflicts with any of the required objective planning standards," end quote. Can we change any to all? Because the way that it is written, it makes it sound like you could maybe pick one of them.
One of them, right.
Right. So with all of the required, and I think having the word required in there makes it clear that we're not just arbitrarily picking every possible objective planning standard, but the required ones. So that
How
that would
about
be my
conflicts with any of all of the required objective planning standards?
with any of all of the
Yeah.
conflicts with any of all. Okay, yeah, that would be fine.
Otherwise, I'm worried might read that you only make the finding if it conflicts with all objective planning standards.
Okay, fair enough.
But
Okay.
I agree that maybe, so does any of all of the required objective planning standards work?
That would be fine.
Okay.
And so, Councilmember Sinks, do you accept that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for catching that.
Sure.
All right, so now we can have some more discussion. John, did you have something to say?
So I had two questions. So we know the intent of the general plan, that for every additional 1,000 residents, the general plan wants 3 acres of park space. I know that, or I feel that we've got to clarify that a little bit stronger in the general plan. But if we're making this checklist so that we don't have to revisit it again, can we put a checklist item in there that it does in fact comply with the park space requirement per the general plan? Make sure that they do check that, and that park space is on the ground, which we need to clarify in the general plan. But again, we want to alert the staff that, oh, they went and looked at all these numbers and everything, but the other aspect that's important to large residential projects is the park space that's provided.
So both the exhibit, so the eligibility checklist and the application checklist can be updated by staff when either the state law changes or the city's municipal code changes. So city staff will be able to make those changes without returning to council.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second item, putting verbiage in there simply to make sure that the applicant really knows that the applicant is fully responsible for the accuracy of everything that he's presented, so that it's very clear that if we don't catch something and it's incorrect, it's his issue, not the city council's or the city staff's issue. Again, the applicant is responsible for the accuracy of everything submitted.
So on page 5 of the application checklist or application package, the certification of compliance with eligibility requirements, the project applicant will have to state that they declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing and all submitted material is true and correct. Does that address your concern?
I'm kind of thinking that it in the intent, yes, but if any errors are subsequently found, it's the applicant's responsibility, not the city has approved something which was presented but was not caught, and it was due to inaccuracy provided by the applicant. So while it's in the right direction, what you're saying, I want to make it clear that if something is subsequently found that it was incorrect and given to the city, sure, he signed it and said under perjury and everything, but subsequently the numbers slipped a digit or did something, and subsequently the project was approved, and then it was discovered that it's the applicant's responsibility. It's not the city is on the hook for having approved that.
So I think that's a legal conclusion. Right now, these procedures address the processing and approval of the application process package, and they provide that the city can reject the application at any time if it finds that it doesn't comply with the requirements, including if the applicant made some mistake in its application. What comes after is something the city's not necessarily able to prescribe through these procedures. That we'd have to analyze SB 35 and the vested right of the applicant to determine, if there's some mistakes caught afterwards. I would say much of that would be addressed through the building permit approval process. That
right.
Is another way to enforce the requirements and the standard conditions of approval. But I'm not entirely sure what you're asking for is something we can do through these procedures.
Right. I mean, I understand where John's coming from. If an applicant submits a project, and we approve it, and then the building department says, hey, wait a second, they're asking for building permits and they can't actually build this because there's some error. Can they come back and say, wait a second, you approved these plans, so you need to change whatever is out of compliance?
Actually, at the last page of the approval, city's approval letter document, the last page, the city already has a document that says if there's any error in the application material, the city has a right to I think, repeal the approval.
Right, and that's why I was saying
that
city
has that language there.
These issues can be addressed through the standard processes, standard conditions of approval that are added to a project, but not necessarily added specifically for an SB 35 project, I think is maybe the way to answer your question.
Is this checklist going to be given to the applicant?
Yes.
Yeah, and so that being the case, I would sure like that protection for the city. If you're giving this checklist to the applicant and saying, we've now done all these checks, I think it behooves us to make sure that, if we need to put it on multiple documents, so be it, but making sure that it's clear that we have gone ahead and we have approved this. But if we subsequently find that there were errors on your part, then, the approval can be...
And it might be then that we publish the standard conditions of approval ahead of time so that the developer sees that as part of the application checklist. And I think, that might be a way to put that front and center so it's...
All right. Okay, so the motion,
Can we call the?
Yeah, we can call the question and vote now. Wait.
Can I clarify something that I raised last time? I think what was proposed last time was to have one possible joint meeting with Planning Commission, and I requested maybe and that was like 10 days before the deadline. I think I requested maybe we want to give the applicant early warning. So what's the final language now?
So we have added a provision on page 4 of the procedures, section 5C, that allows the community development director on a case-by-case basis to schedule an additional oversight meeting to assess a mixed-use project's compliance with the 2/3 residential requirement in the government code that would be held prior to the joint consistency meeting that's held for all projects. And we also made clear that the joint consistency meeting that will be held for all projects can be held earlier than 5 business days before the final consistency determination if the timing of the initial review allows.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, which document is the procedures you're referring to?
Resolution?
This is the resolution
Okay.
adopting the procedures on page 4.
Page 4, okay.
5C.
Okay.
5C. Oh, section 5C, okay, got it. And presumably that oversight meeting can be at the discretion of the community development director in terms of which bodies sit on it, in terms whether the council as well as the planning, it's a joint meeting? Or?
It will be a joint meeting. That's
Oh,
what
it
we
will
have
be a joint
proposed
meeting.
here.
Okay.
Because of the strict timelines to make sure that both bodies
see, got
can
it.
conduct oversight.
Got it, okay, I see it. All right, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so call the question. Vote.
Not with your rights.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we are on to item 13, options for unofficial transcription of city council meetings, continued from July 16th. Thank you for our IT director for sticking around so long. And Bill, will you be speaking? Welcome.
He's here to answer any questions. I'll review your staff report for you.
Okay, sure.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, Grace Schmidt, City Clerk. So at your July 16th meeting, you viewed a demonstration of the free YouTube auto captioning feature, which can be used to create an unofficial transcript of City Council meetings. This demonstration showed how timestamps in the transcript are live and linked directly to that portion in the video. You can also search the transcript for specific words, which will again link directly to that part of the video. It is also possible to copy the entire transcript and paste it into a Word document in order to search the text that way. Other options for transcribing meetings would be to either hire an outside transcription vendor service, which is what Palo Alto does, or our current vendor, Granicus, which is what San Jose and Sunnyvale does. Using one of these services would possibly provide a more accurate transcription, but with a larger cost. And the details regarding those costs were noted in your staff report. If council does decide to implement the YouTube auto captioning, then a YouTube video link to the council meeting would be placed on the Granicus Agenda's minutes page. And as we talked earlier in the demonstration, that meetings that extend beyond 4 hours, likely for city council meetings, would contain multiple videos with a link to a YouTube playlist. And the city council meeting would be the first video in this playlist and would automatically play each section of that meeting in order until the end of the sequence. Happy to answer any questions. Staff does recommend using this free service in order to save the taxpayers some money. However, it's City Council's decision, and I'm here to answer any questions, as is Bill.
Are there any speaker cards on this?
Let me check.
Great. Okay, well, yeah, I looked at the comparison of costs, and free is always appreciated. And, I mean, I'm willing to give this a try. If it doesn't work out, we can always move to one of the services where we have to pay. I mean, it's not an outrageous amount of money, 16,800 to up to 36,000 per year, depending on which service. I'm surprised that there's seems to be such a difference in cost, but let's see. Anyway, so that's my feeling. Let's try the YouTube service and see how it works out.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of value to this technology. You know, they're continuing to improve it for various purposes, and I think that's all to the good.
Yeah, and I mean, once you search the YouTube and find YouTube file and find what you're looking for, then you can go back and look at the actual meeting recording. I mean, the problem now is you have to wade through a really long recording to find what you're looking for. But, I mean, hopefully our meetings will be getting shorter, but...
Well, specifically, I move that we limit meetings to 3 hours and 59 minutes. Not really.
Right,
That's
yeah,
a
we
joke.
are working on that.
I know, and I appreciate that.
So, any more discussion?
I agree. I agree with the idea of trying out the YouTube service for a period of year and then revisiting it. 16,800 is not much for Granicus, and it seems like Sunnyvale and San Jose get some kind of utility out of it. But I'm compelled by the comment by Councilmember Singh that this is constantly improving. I mean, maybe a year from now we'll find that it's, you know,
We can have 6-hour meetings or 10-hour meetings.
and the same price. So, yeah, no, I think it would be a good idea to try out the free service for a period of time.
Okay, anyone else, or direction to staff?
No, I'd also say that I think it's a good thing to try.
Yeah, it's good. I hope that we apply this for the other meetings we record, Parks and Rec, and Planning Commission meetings, and
Town hall meetings.
Town hall meetings, yeah.
Okay, all right, so I think we don't really have to take any vote here. The staff has direction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we have no more oral communications. We are, no. So we're on to council and staff comments and future agenda items. What? On which item?
No, just oral.
Oh,
We have oral continued.
sure. No, that's fine, yeah.
Council and staff, my name is Brent Bardsley, 10408 Minhart Lane, Cupertino, resident for 35 years. I have a short comment on the housing over at Vallco. My main concern is the parcel tax that every residence has for the schools. I think it's $200 for Cupertino Union and $98 for Fremont Union. Excuse me. So if there's a proposal to build a large number of rental units, I'd like to see those parcel taxes go to those units, even though they're rental units, and paid for by the developer. That's a big concern for me because the parcel taxes are so inequitable anyway, and by putting a large number of rental units, it makes them even more inequitable because just having the Vallco parcel only pay one parcel tax is very unfair. So that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are on to council and staff comments and future agenda items. John? should we come back to you?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Darcy.
On August 22nd, I was very happy to attend the Employee Service Awards barbecue. It's always a great event every year over at Blackberry Farm where we can see the city manager and the department heads reward their employees and extend appreciation and good amount of camaraderie around the people that work professionally for the city. And later that day, we had the ribbon cutting for the demonstration garden outside of City Hall. And I think that's just been a tremendous project. I've been really pleased to see that. My initial interface with that was as mayor last year when they're asking to, our PIO, Brian Babcock, asked to record essentially a public service announcement telling people in our city that we had this demonstration garden. And it's been quite something to watch it grow over the course of the year. And then more recently having those informational signs and basically placards out there, I think just lends so much to City Hall, and it does it for a really good, ecological, sustainable, and you know, frankly, more interesting than, you know, just kind of your regular grassy area kind of lawn outside of City Hall. So really appreciate that. Mayor, I thought you did a great job in your remarks there. There was an email from the public over the course of these last couple of weeks that asked about whether Cupertino could look into having a similar lobbying registration law to what the city of Santa Clara has. I found that really interesting. I looked into it, and indeed Santa Clara does have registration requirements, and I think it provides a pretty interesting model, and I would be interested in taking a look at whether that might work for Cupertino. And the general idea being that, you know, when we have people that are monetarily compensated to take positions in front of us, it generally is a good thing to know, you know, and I think that's a fair request. But in any event, you know, if we could take a look at what Santa Clara is doing, I'd really appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
So first, I'd like to do an event announcement for Ride for Diabetes to be held this Sunday, September 8th. This ride will raise funds for diabetes, but the most interesting is they have 3 routes from 5 miles, 12 miles to 25 miles, all go through city streets. So if you would like to check out sightseeing in Cupertino on bicycle safely on a Sunday with many people guiding you, this is the best chance to join. So I understand the city manager has signed up. Yeah. And so you can sign up at ridefordiabetes.org, $25 a person, $75 for a whole family. Yeah.
And that's the number 4, right? Not FOR in Ride for Diabetes.
Ride for number 4, yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so on the 7th of August, and I guess I didn't report last time, I participated in the Historical Society Chinese Valentine's Day event. So they had a speaker talking about present poems for Chinese Valentine's Day. Really appreciate that they include Chinese culture in the Cupertino Historical Society. And on the 16th, I attended the Kids Film Festival, another city event that the city helped sponsor, held in Memorial Park. It has a lot of people there and good food. And then on the 17th, I attended a Women's Leadership Summit organized by Supervisor Cindy Chavez. And it was very well attended, a lot of booths and a lot of women leaders and teenagers attending this event. And I also attended the city employee barbecue at the Blackberry Farm. and really nice to see so many city employees who have been with us 20, 30 years, and also nice to see a lot of them started as a part-time employee, started in the front lobby, and now they work their way up, and then really the city has helped them develop them in a career in the city. So front desk is the best way to start your career in the city. And I also attended a demonstration garden event, very well organized, and the consultant was very knowledgeable about all kinds of ways to provide a sustainable garden. And then on the 26th, I attended a Chow Zhou Association annual meeting. This is an interesting, it's a small city in China, but they have about 500 members in the Silicon Valley. Most of them didn't come directly from China. They are refugees from Laos, from Vietnamese, and then they all came to China, to US, and now they are all connected through their the ancestry heritage. So it was very interesting. And then I attended the Wasteport community meeting on the 28th. And the applicant, the developer presented it was a good presentation. And I think there were comments from the audience that they really appreciate this developer this time present a plan that complies with the general plan. But then one comment from the audience is they were hoping this could be a senior community. But for seniors, town hall with 2 stories doesn't work. They have trouble climbing stairs, so they would appreciate a flat. For senior, maybe condos with 1 story. So that's something to consider for our senior community. So I'm wondering whether this kind of development process, it seems we don't see the plan until it's all well developed. So could there be possible that they present the initial ideas to bring more input, then that this kind of input could be considered early on? I don't know. This might be too late now. Seems it's all well designed. So I'm wondering whether this outreach process could start earlier for other future projects. But it's still good to see that. And on the 29th, I attended a Main Street Wine Stroll event shortly. And it's nice to see. That's a great way to bring people out to see all the restaurants in Main Street. And then on the 29th, I also attended a Pali Gala. It's an Asian Pacific Islander event with a lot of leaders. They provide summer classes and Dianza college classes to educate more civic leaders. And yeah, okay.
Okay, Councilmember Sinks.
It's great to see the rapport every year between employees. They're all, departments particularly, are very spirited in cheering for employees that come up to receive their service awards, so that was terrific. I also attended the Food and Wine Stroll. It was incredibly successful. People were, I was listening to conversations on what people thought of the restaurants at Main Street and at 19800, so it was in both locations. And many of the restaurants and other businesses opened their doors and served food and whatnot. And I think there were new discoveries made by a lot of residents saying, "Hey, I'm coming back here." I know I had those aha moments for places that I hadn't been to before, and so I'm looking forward to returning to patronize those businesses with my family and friends. I'll remind folks, as I did last time, we're having a town hall meeting in this chamber on Monday, the 16th of September from 6:30 to 8:30. On hand will be Air District staff talking about pollution from the local cement plant, which is the kiln, the quarry, and also the truck traffic that ensues. So we will be taking questions. You're welcome to send me those questions in advance. They're going to go to somebody named Christina Chu at the Air District, and her email address is kchu@bacmed.gov. That's BAAQMD.gov. And so we'll be taking them in advance. We'll also be collecting cards on the floor here and see if we can group things together to get the many questions you may have about air quality answered. What the history of this has been, what we're doing now, the new things that are being implemented, and what the potential holds in the future for improvements. So Monday, September 16th, here at 6:30. Thanks.
Okay, so I went to the barbecue as well. I went to the ribbon cutting and cut the ribbon. What other exciting stuff? I missed all the events with the food because I had a meeting with Microsoft, a long meeting to talk about IoT and what they offer in terms of back-end support as we move forward in our city and implement more Internet of Things and hopefully to make the city safer and more efficient. This is just a preliminary meeting to see what they have to offer. We're not committed to using their technology yet. I think that's the only other thing I have. Thank you. So.
Okay.
John.
So
Did I
bounce
skip you?
back
Oh,
to
yeah,
me?
that's right. You weren't ready. Okay.
So continue the community outreach with the park walks on Saturday the 24th. It was at Wilson Park. On Saturday the 31st, it was the Union Pacific Trail. Then I also went to the Main Street Food and Wine event and also attended the Westport Community Meeting for the developer to show the community what his project is that he's proposing. For those interested in the park walks, the previous list, the last item that we had was the Union Pacific Trail, and so we're creating a new list that'll probably start a week from Saturday, because we haven't got it published yet, unless we get it done. Okay.
Actually, following the city walk, we would have coffee talk.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Once a month. So the first one will be September 13th. So we hope to visit different coffee places, eateries in Cupertino. That will be Friday morning. So it will be, we are thinking 8:30, so that people might drop by before they go to work.
Wait, is the city paying for the coffee or not?
I'll pick it up.
Okay.
Really?
Okay, so I also went on the last two city walks. It's great, except we don't walk very far. We do a lot of talking and not a lot of walking. But it's really good. We get a lot of good feedback from the residents. And my idea going forward, besides the coffee talk, is to have more impromptu council people drop into parks and try to talk to the people that are not really plugged into everything the council's doing, and just they want to see someone they can complain to or suggest something to. Oh, and before I go to Deb, one more thing we didn't talk about. On this past weekend, there were a bunch of complaints about signs being placed in bike lanes, in wheelchair ramps, blocking sidewalks, etc. So the city manager had a code enforcement person working on the weekend. I believe we collected 62 illegally placed signs that I presumably are over at the service center and can be claimed. It's not much of a fine. It doesn't cover the cost of enforcement. We may want to look at that later. But hopefully it will send the message to please be considerate when you place signs. If someone in a wheelchair comes along or a bicyclist and the sign's in their way, I mean, it could be catastrophic. So I'm really appreciate the city manager and code enforcement for working on the weekend and addressing this issue. And I believe the city manager has something to say as well.
I just have one announcement for a future agenda item on Ragnarok Creek. Those documents will be posted by Friday. The draft staff report might lag by a day, but all of those will be ready for your review. Remember that the design for the Ragnarok Creek Trail is 65% complete, and we froze it there, so there's little gaps of information, but it'll be all available Friday, including the options.
So
Thanks.
this is the effort to post the large items
Or controversial
earlier.
items out
Yeah,
in front.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have one question about future agenda item. Regarding the Youth Climate Action Group, they proposed 4 items when they spoke to the council. So they would like clarification. I remember you said we don't need to add any action items. They are all items the city already have.
Yes, if
our
you're talking
work
about
program.
reduction of investment in fossil fuels, adopting certain REACH codes, there were 2 more.
Plastic
Plastic
reduction.
Well, there was
use
the
of
natural
single-use
gas,
reduction
and-
and
Natural gas.
So there's 4 items we're looking at through the Sustainability Office.
So
those
we don't need to add any new item on our work
No, but we can
program.
provide a status at some point.
Okay, and the fossil fuel, I remember, it's not really an item, so that's, the finance office will consider that, right?
Right.
Okay,
In our investment for portfolio. right.
okay, good,
Okay,
thank you.
anything else? Can we adjourn? Great, what time is it? Oh, my God. Oh, is that a record? Thank you.